Hi everybody, it's Katie back with another episode of my vlog, and it's Sunday, so that means it's time for the Cinema Club Sunday Roundup, where you guys find out what we watched this last week, and you tell me what you watched down in the comments below, because like I always say, I'm always looking for feedback. I'm always looking for more movies to watch. Maybe you guys have some cool suggestions for things that I've never seen or that I need to revisit. So you let me know what you've been watching. And here's what we've been watching. We started the week last Sunday with a total classic from 1959, Some Like It Hot, starring Jack Lemmon, Tony Curtis, and Marilyn Monroe. If you've never seen this movie, I want you to stop everything and see this movie. It is probably one of the funniest movies I have ever seen. It gets ranked as one of the funniest movies of all time on so many critics' lists. It is unbelievably funny. I can't tell you enough how hilarious this movie is. If you've never seen it, the basic plot synopsis is takes place during Prohibition. Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon are musicians who accidentally witness a mafia execution, and then they have to skip town so that they don't get killed by the mafiosos who have done the execution. And in order to skip town, they wind up dressing up in drag and disguising themselves as two female musicians so they can go on a trip down to Florida with an all-female band, and this is how they're going to escape from the mafia. Meanwhile, in the band, we have Marilyn Monroe amongst a bunch of other beautiful female musicians, romantic entanglements sort of ensue. And I don't want to say anything else because, like I said, everybody needs to watch it. But rest assured, this is one of the funniest, most groundbreaking movies I've ever seen. I mean, 1959, the two male leads spend half of the movie in drag. There's a ton of homosexual references. It's kind of unreal how ahead of its time it is. And I like to kind of put myself in the mindset of people who might have seen it when it first came out and think, like, what did audiences in 1959 think about this movie? They probably were blown away. It was probably completely scandalous. Anyhow, one of the funniest movies I've ever seen. The ending, I mean, literally makes me fall off of a chair every time I see it, and I know exactly how it ends. So that's how funny it is. Anyhow, if you, for some reason, don't like older movies or think they're kind of slow, or, like you're like, oh, I need something with faster pacing or whatever, I invite you to check this one out. It's, again, older, 1959, but it just keeps moving really fast, and the jokes keep coming. And all of the leads, all three of them, but the two guys give these incredible performances. I mean, Tony Curtis plays three different characters in the movie. So anyhow, I'm kind of trailing along here, but 2 thumbs way up, A+++. Absolutely recommended for everybody in existence. Holds up incredibly well all these years later, and still feels so far ahead of its time. It's unbelievable. So, Some Like It Hot, go see that movie. If you can see it in a movie theater, that would be even more incredible, but stream it if you can't. So that's a great one. The next night after that, we decided to continue with our sort of light heist theme and watch Inside Man from 2006, directed by Spike Lee, starring Clive Owen, Denzel Washington, and Jodie Foster. This movie is incredible. This is one of the movies that I watched by myself while Sean was in the hospital, and then I wanted to bring it back around for everybody because I just was like, whoa, the whole gang is gonna love this movie, and they did. It's a pretty cool twist on a heist movie because it has the word twist right there in it. I'm not going to say much more, but it's very cool if you like complicated bank robbery type movies with twisty scenarios, with you're not quite sure what's going on, right? It's great. Denzel Washington, incredible actor, incredible performance. Jodie Foster, I love her in basically everything I've seen her in, and she plays a great stone cold bitch in this movie. Which I loved. She's kind of a hateable character, but she plays it really well. And Clive Owen plays the leader of the gang of robbers, and he's incredible in his role. He's so incredible in his role that we actually decided to also watch Children of Men this week, which also came out in 2006. He must have been busy that year, but I'll get to that in a minute because that's a little later in the week. So Inside Man, really cool heist movie. It's an interesting portrait of New York in the sort of not immediate post 9/11 world, but it's 2006, right? So it's 5 years later. And, Spike Lee is always doing these sort of, it's like a love letter to New York as well as other things, right? It's great. Again, I don't want to say too much about it. If you like heist movies, if you like any of the actors I mentioned, if you like Spike Lee, you're going to like this movie. So definitely check out Inside Man. The next night after we watched Inside Man, we finally got a chance to screen Knives Out, which came out, of course, last year. This is the big star-studded whodunit from Rian Johnson. Again, two thumbs way up. We loved it. I can't say too much about it because it has some really great twists and turns in it. But I will say Daniel Craig as a Southern guy, again, just like his role in Logan Lucky. I mean, they're not at all the same character, but it's really interesting to watch Daniel Craig take on these sort of iconic American, I guess not iconic, stereotypical American roles. I actually never thought I liked Daniel Craig as an actor, and I did a little bit of research after liking him so much in Logan Lucky and in Knives Out, and I realized almost his entire career has been as James Bond. I mean, he's been in a couple of other things, but I mean, that's really the bulk of his career. And I just don't like Daniel Craig as James Bond. And I don't even think it's that I don't like Daniel Craig as James Bond, it's that I don't like the way the people in control of the Bond franchise have written the character in the Daniel Craig era, if that makes sense. So anyhow, this has been kind of a revelatory week or two for me of discovering I actually do like Daniel Craig as an actor quite a bit, and I'm super curious to watch more non-James Bond movies that he's been in. And I actually got kind of interested to watch the next James Bond that's coming out, even though it's going to be like 3 hours long, and they're delaying it by like 7 months because of the coronavirus thing. But anyhow, all that aside, Daniel Craig plays a private investigator in Knives Out who gets called into the scene of, is it a suicide or is it a murder? We're not sure. Let's bring in law enforcement and a private investigator to all sort of take a crack at it in this, I guess it's sort of a traditional whodunit, right? Murder mystery that takes place in a big old house with a cast of rich family members of this rich old guy who is a successful crime novelist. The thing keeps twisting and turning. It's never going to be what you expect. Again, I can't really say more than we liked it a whole lot. Thoroughly enjoyed Ana de Armas's performance as Marta, the caregiver. She was fantastic. Everybody was fantastic, though. I loved Jamie Lee Curtis, loved Don Johnson. Toni Collette was awesome in her role. It's a great movie. If you enjoy murder mysteries, if you enjoy whodunits, if you enjoy any type of a little bit of a twisty mystery story, you're gonna love Knives Out. It also has a bunch of little hidden gems and Easter eggs in it that are really fun that, of course, I'm not going to say anything about because spoiler alert. But yeah, we missed seeing that one in the theater last year, which I was bummed about. So we kind of jumped on it as soon as it was available to rent on streaming and totally loved it. So also recommended, 2 thumbs way up. I think I loved every movie we watched this week, which is pretty rare. They're all fantastic movies. So let's see. The next night we actually watched a documentary called Ramen Heads, which came out in 2017, which is a profile of the guy who is the current king of ramen in Japan. His name is Osamu Tomita. And the film spends about half the time just on him and his little ramen shop and the way he makes his ramen and his techniques and everything. It was fascinating. I'm always curious with food shows, so much of food is the way it smells and the way it tastes. And these are the two senses that we absolutely cannot convey through film. So it's always a challenge for the filmmakers to show you something and describe it in such a way that it makes it appetizing for you as a viewer. And they did a great job of that with this documentary. Tomita spends a lot of time on his broth. He does a dipping ramen instead of like a big bowl of clear broth with a bunch of noodles in it. It's a thicker broth that has a bunch of kind of funky stuff in it. He cooks it for days. And then he serves it with a side of noodles that you then dip into the thicker broth and slurp that up together. So it was fascinating to watch his process of how he makes his ramen and his broth, how he works with his apprentices, how the whole system works at his shop. Of course, it's one of these tiny little shops where hardly anyone can fit in there, and it's way, way popular. So there's like always a line out the door. And then the film gets into some of the other current, masters of ramen in Japan right now. I'm a big fan of ramen, Japan, everything Japanese food, all this stuff. So, I loved it. It was a great documentary. It's a little over narrated, and there's some kind of over the top music in parts, which were like, what? But other than that, fascinating, great topic. Really made me want to go try this guy's ramen, put him on my list for whenever I ever get over to Japan. So yeah, Ramen Heads, 2017. We streamed it on Hulu, I think. And then the next night after that, the kids wanted to watch something really scary. They said, Mom, what do you got? We're ready to be really scared. And I said, all right, you guys, I'm going to pull it out. We're going to watch Hereditary. So this is another one that I watched. I kind of watched it. I tried to watch it with Sean right after he came home from the hospital. We didn't involve the kids in our first screening. And he was, still in this state where he was very emotional. He was getting very triggered by things. His mom had died about 6 months before he had a stroke. So the fact that the movie starts with a mom dying and then the mom's ghost showing up was a little bit much for him to start with. And then when it got to that scene, if you've seen the movie, you know the one I'm talking about, he just noped out. He was like, turn it off. I can't watch this movie. And I was like, okay, I totally respect that. So we stopped the movie and did something else. And then he went to bed. And then I watched the rest of the movie by myself, which was a total mistake because I totally got myself scared and worked up about the shadows in the corner and, looking down the basement stairs to turn the lights off at night, and totally got myself freaked out. So loved the movie, wanted to show it to the kids. So when they asked for something really scary, that's what I pulled out. And we watched that one a couple nights ago. And boy, everybody loved it. Everybody got totally freaked out about it. The kids, after the movie was over, would not go down in the basement to turn the lights off down here. So I consider that a success of a too scary movie, if the kids are too scared to go turn the basement lights off. And I told them that's exactly what the movie did to me. So it's an incredible movie. If you haven't seen it, if you're a horror person, see this movie. If you're not a horror person, it's going to be a little bit much. But if you are a horror person and for some reason you haven't seen Hereditary, please see it. If you're not a horror person, but you're not bugged by scares and squeamish gore body stuff, see this movie. Toni Collette is so incredible in this movie. The performance she gives is just unreal. She's a mom who's just lost her mom, and then other tragedies occur. And then is she going crazy in her spiral into grief, or is something else happening? I'm not going to tell you because I want you to see this movie. It's incredible. Both times I've watched it, I've just been kind of like, ugh, after I saw it. And then it left me thinking for days. It's a great one. And the second watch was really fun because, of course, I noticed things in the beginning of the movie that I didn't pick up on the first time around that were telling me something was going to happen later in the movie, which is great. And I love when directors do that sort of stuff. So, Hereditary, incredible movie. Please see it if you haven't seen it. And then last night, we went and watched Children of Men. Like I mentioned earlier, we got inspired because of watching Inside Man with Clive Owen also in 2006. So I said to the kids, you know what? Children of Men has been actually at the top of our to-watch list since I made the watch list. It was the oldest thing on the Amazon viewing queue and the very top of my list that's actually written down on paper. And I said, we gotta watch this movie. You guys are gonna love it. And they did, of course. I saw it in the theater when it came out and haven't watched it since. I actually read the book after I saw the movie because I liked the movie so much. Liked the book better, that's how it goes. Movie holds up incredibly well. I was so pleased. Sometimes we watch these movies that came out maybe 15 years ago and it's like, oh, it's really dated or whatever. This movie was incredible. And given, the current situation with climate change and coronavirus and people kind of getting panicky about political stuff, it made a dystopian movie set just 7 years in our future, even more than I think it felt 15 years ago when it first came out. It's an incredible movie. Everyone does a great job in it. Clive Owen is great. Michael Caine as the old hippie is the best part of the movie. Of course, he steals the show just like he does in the Batman movies. You know, not overdone, not too much in your face. I mean, there's a lot of stuff happens in your face, but they don't do that thing in the movie where, oh, it's an action scene and I really want you to pay attention to this, so we're going to slow it down and have everything be in slow-mo now. I hate that. It's just very matter of fact. Everything just happens the way it would happen. And of course, in the big action scenes in this film, the camera is almost a active participant in the scene. You know, it's sort of like chasing Clive Owen around through things and then turns around to show you something else from the reverse angle. And it's really cool the way that the camera moves through the scenes in this movie. There's been other films that have done that also, but I feel like in Children of Men, it's super effective and done really, really well. The other thing that I really like about this movie is I feel like it ends where it should. I don't want to say how it ends if you haven't seen it, but a lot of movies suffer from this thing called like the 5-minute false ending, where it's like there's a really great ending point and then they want to do this like, and then we wrapped it up and explained it and made it all happy or whatever. And it's like, man, you guys should have ended that earlier. So I feel like Children of Men ends in the perfect point for its narrative. Sean actually disagrees with me. He thinks it should end about 15 seconds before it does, which would be a much more brutal ending than the way that it does end. But either way, I mean, both of those would make incredible endings. But I love the way it actually ends, which is pretty rare for me. That's one of my complaints about a lot of contemporary films, is they just go on too long. So speaking of going on too long, I think I'm going on too long. That was the last movie we watched. We watched that last night. So I'm going to leave it here and again invite you guys to drop me a comment down below and let me know what you've been watching last week in your chapter of Cinema Club, or what you're looking forward to watching next week if you got something coming up. I keep on saying this, but man, I'm determined. Ford v Ferrari next week. I'm going tomorrow. That's it. Okay. Look for that review next week. It's happening. All right, you guys. Thanks so much for watching my vlog. I totally appreciate it. I hope you're having a great time watching this too. And I will see you back in this space in 2 days for another episode. Take care.